Hello dear viewers, and welcome back to the ancient dwarven hold of our ancestors. Today I will be talking about the game Alaloth, Champions of the Four Kingdoms. Alaloth, as I shall hereby be calling it, is an isometric action role-playing game developed by Gamera Interactive, published by Gamera Interactive and Ancient Scroll. It was released in November 2024. Before we get going, dear viewer, can I quickly request that if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving this video a thumbs up and perhaps leave a comment with your own thoughts on the game. In Alaloth, you will adventure through the land of Playmen, divided as it is into four kingdoms. This is in an attempt to fight the forces of evil that have assailed the land. Your ultimate aim is to do away with the dark god Alaloth at the centre of the map, whose powers corrupts the lands and threatens to send it into ruin. Alaloth is an interesting game, quite unique in a couple of ways, in that it is isometric in view, but of a zoomed out perspective reminiscent of old Infinity Engine games like Baldur's Gate or the newer Pillars of Eternity games. Again, similar to these, it makes use of pre-rendered backdrops rather than the three-dimensional environments. Finally, rather than being party-focused like those other games, in Alaloth you control just a single character in a somewhat Souls-like experience. The graphical style going on here in this here game is, as briefly mentioned, a marriage of two-dimensional backdrop assets and three-dimensional characters. The game is further largely shown in two different perspectives, one of a map view in which you're travelling overland between locations, and a local view of each location itself. The theme here in both the overland map and the locations themselves is of a dark, gritty fantasy. The world is a grim one, with darkness and monsters in the shadows skulking and lurking, looking to do in any good folk they come across. The overworld map is populated with all the locations that you can travel to and visit. There is a lot of them, dear viewers. They vary from friendly towns to strange sanctuaries, great glaciers or roving falls, and of course dangerous locations known as combat areas. The map looks good and conveys a lot of information on the lay of the land and where everything is. I'm not sure how else they might do it, but as you load in for the first time and see all the many different locations you can freely visit whenever you want, it can feel quite overwhelming. So many locations, where to go first? There are worse struggles to have. When you travel to a location and enter it, you'll be presented with the local map of the place itself. I'll be quite straightforward here and say simply that the artists involved have come up with some absolutely beautiful two-dimensional backdrops and scenery. The different places, from dwarven holds, mighty as they are, to elven cities, haunted crypts, forests, ancient evil lairs, and everything in between, are all wonderfully drawn and are a great boon to the game's appeal. Again, if you like the art style in all those old games like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale, along with the Pillars games, then you're going to like this too. Furthermore, if you haven't played any of those games, you could still greatly enjoy what's going on here. The characters, both your hero and the NPCs you'll encounter on your travels, are three-dimensional models. This contrasts with the backdrops but works well. Yourself, the various folk you encounter along with all the monsters and goblins and dragons and such, look impressive and formidable. What I would say though is that because the perspective is so far zoomed out, it can be difficult to completely appreciate them as they're so far away. Perhaps though this means that they can get away with not having such detailed models. This perspective has both its positives and its negatives, but it is the choice made by the developers. The bigger monsters of course are easier to admire. The music of Alaloth I liked quite a lot. It is what you might come to expect with a fantasy-themed affair, but it is notable in how understated it can be. It isn't overly dramatic or in your face, as perhaps it could be, which I like. There is a lot of lore and text in the game, with only a small amount of it being voiced. Most books and scrolls and dialogue between characters is in text form only and has to be read through. When loading into certain locations, there is voice descriptions of where you're headed, but beyond that it is all written form only. I can imagine that this would be very costly in both drive space and voice actors, which as this is more of a smaller game, I can understand why they didn't. Saying that, there is an awful lot of things to read in game, which could be a bit much sometimes if you're more interested in the other parts of it. You don't need to read everything you can see though, with a lot of it being background lore of the world. When you fire up Alaloth for the first time, you can select from 2 different modes, either single player or multiplayer. The single mode sees you as the only chosen champion that will be adventuring around the land, bringing the fight to evil and all that entails. In the multiplayer mode, you'll be one of several champions that you'll have to fight against and wrestle for control of locations with. Obviously, being an old dwarf as I am, I decided to play single player. I can't be doing with all that extra fancy. You're able to create a character from several races, including humans, elves, and of course dwarves. Obviously there was only one choice for me, so I created a brave and mighty old dwarf. You can set your alignment from good to evil, your background and god, along with various physical features for your character. Because of the zoomed out perspective, what features that you might have for your character are not easily seen, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. I like it very much when I can create my own avatar to my own likings, especially if you can play a dwarf, so this is a big thumbs up from me. The UI, or user interface, of Alaloth is functional and usable, displaying various elements on the screen that are relevant to the game. The character screen, the inventory, spells and skills and such are clear and readable, so it all works well and feels pleasant to deal with. My only issue was that sometimes when clicking on different tabs or panels, it would take several clicks with the mouse for it to register and select what you want. If I'm being picky, I would also have liked perhaps some more tooltip information when you mouse over things. For example, if you moused over something like luck, it would tell you what it did, or what 150 vires actually means. The game displays a lot of information besides this, which it does very well. Depending on what race you have chosen, you begin the map in one of the 4 kingdoms. I of course began in the Dwarven realm, being charged by the High King to bring peace to the land and defeat the evil menace of Alaloth. The main gameplay loop of Alaloth involves you traversing the overworld map and entering locations such as towns or fighting areas and such. When you reach a local area that you want to enter, you're loaded into the local screen, and if it is a friendly location, you can run around the place talking to people, buying and selling, crafting and other bits. Or you can get stuck in with the baddies and take them all down if it's a combat area. As well as the combat areas, there are roving bands of nasties on the overworld map, and if they catch you while you're travelling, they will force a confrontation, which will take you to a combat screen where you then need to defeat them or be defeated yourself. As I said, when you first start the game, the sheer amount of stuff on the overworld map that you can see is quite daunting, for the game is totally open in that you can visit nearly every location you want to. This is not to say that you will survive those locations, but you can go there if you fancy. This free and open world is cool and is quite huge, but yes, it can feel a bit much, especially at the start. Perhaps this is just me and my OCD, but I could see someone seeing all that and being, bugger me, where do I start with all this, and perhaps putting it down. When you begin the game, you are told of 4 artifacts that you must find that will give you access to the 5th kingdom and Alaloth himself. These are found in the various fighting areas of the land. There are also tutorial screens when you first click things, which gives you insight into what it does or what you're supposed to do there. Once you know the basics, you're basically left alone to get up to what you will. In friendly locations like towns and cities, you can do all sorts of things that you might expect in an RPG, like visiting traders to buy and sell items, crafting gear, speaking to NPCs and resting. The locations are wonderfully drawn and themed around the location and kingdom they are in. Dwarves live under the mountains in great halls with forges and might and are of course the coolest. Elves live in the forest realms with lots of trees and greenery. Humans live in towns and such, and orcs live in a desolation of desert with lots of red and yellow. You'll be spending a lot of time knocking about such places, running hither as you go about doing quests and getting gear and all that. One thing you will have to be mindful of is that there is a day and night cycle. Besides being a way of showing the advance of time, it will affect who is at what location, i.e. some NPCs are only available in the evening in a town, or most traders are only present during the day. This adds an interesting twist on things, as locations are different places at night than they are in the day. The downside to this is that if you're looking to speak to a certain person in the day and forget that you need to either go to sleep at the inn if available or go back to the overworld map and advance the time to day and then re-enter the location, this can be quite a pain having to do this a lot, as you spend a lot of time running about the place. But perhaps if you want this night and day cycle, then this is what you have to put up with. Shrine locations are spots on the map that are dedicated to a god or deity or some such. When you first enter one of these shrines, they will later become available as a respawn location if you die nearby. Points of interest are significant local locations, like the top of a great icy cliff or a multicoloured cave system. Generally, there's a lot less NPCs in these areas. The fighting areas are set locations in the world filled with danger and loot. These can be all sorts of things, like old castles, cliff tops, forests and others. They are filled with baddies to fight and loot to plunder. It is at these locations where you will do the most of the combat in the game, and what you're aiming to defeat. For as much as I can tell, there is a set layout with set enemies throughout it, finishing with an end boss which you'll need to defeat. Like a Dark Souls-esque thing, you only get one life, one go, as it were, to defeat all the baddies in the area and vanquish the final boss. You will pick up loot as you move around, which will then be added to the chest at the end of the level. Indeed, in order to collect any of the loot, you must defeat the end boss and click the large chest that is behind them. So, if you die, it is all gone. Pretty harsh, but that is the sort of Souls-like thing they were going for here. You will then resurrect at any local shrine that you have uncovered. There are a few things to note when it comes to combat areas. There are buffs and potions available to you, but you can only set 4 potions before you go in and consume just 1 food buff from anything you've cooked or purchased on your travels. Once the fighting area has begun, you're unable to open your inventory or equipment screen. This means you have only 4 potions that you can make use of in the area and 1 foodstuff. If you run out, then that is it, and you have to do your best to survive or die and lose all of the loot. So, the actual combat of the game, what is it like, Old Dwarf? Well, I would say the combat is a mix of Dark Souls-esque stuff and real-time combat with skill use. You control your character and move them around the screen using the WASD keys, with the left and right click of the mouse being light and heavy attack respectively. The buttons 1 to 6 are used for your active abilities, and F1 to F4 are for consumable potions. I use an MMO mouse with 12 buttons on the side, which I map to the 1 to 6 on the keyboard, so I could use these active abilities without taking my fingers off of the movement buttons. I imagine if you didn't do this, then it could be quite tricky and awkward at times. This, along with how the UI behaves sometimes, suggests to me that perhaps the developer assumed you might be using a controller, though as I said, I used keyboard and mouse through the entire game. Your character is responsive to the movement keys, allowing you to quickly move in and out of combat as you need. Spacebar will perform a dodge, and left shift will perform a block, or, if you time it right, a parry, which allows you to follow up with further damage. Enemies will swing and swipe at you and come in various different shapes and sizes of your usual sort of fantasy types. You want to dodge away or make use of parries and blocks to defeat enemies. If you allow enemies to get attacks on you, you will be quickly defeated. Your fast attack is quick but lower damage, and your heavy attack is slow but deals more damage. You need to time it right with your attacks and combos to get as many hits in while taking as few of your own as possible. Alongside your weapon swings will be the special abilities that you can cast. They come from a wide range of classes like Warlord, Berserker, Cleric, Mage, Rogue, Warden, and several others. These are all active abilities that help in the fight some way, like turning you into a bear and charging at the enemy, casting fire attacks, huge single target blows with your weapons, summoning elementals, and many others. There is a lot to choose from when building your character, which allows for a lot of personalisation and creativity. I think this is a great boon indeed. I love trying out different builds and seeing what I can come up with. You could probably play through this game multiple times and have completely different builds each time, making use of different types of weaponry, armour, skills and talents. This is great stuff. In case you're worried about making a mistake when building your character, and I would worry too, as I tend to worry, You are able to completely reset all your talents and stats so that you can create something anew. During your travels, you'll come across NPCs that could potentially become companions. There doesn't seem to be much in terms of filling some requirement, except that your character has the same alignment. This means some will join you and some will not. Why I am talking about it here is that up to 2 companions can join you in any combat. This can change how fights go, as your companions are capable of doing a lot of damage on their own, as well as taking the enemy's attention off yourself. The dynamic shifts from a personal one-on-one Souls-like affair to a more traditional party fighting, with the exception that you can't take direct control of your allies, instead using basic commands like follow or attack. Most of the time I let them get on with things, as they will happily get to smacking things by themselves. I would recommend trying to get at least 1 companion as quick as you can, as this will help to ease the stress of trying to defeat combat areas early on in game. There is a lot of stats in Alaloth, like resistance of several types, crit chance, crit damage, bleed chance, luck, confusion resistance, and so forth. This allows you to monitor how your character is weighing up, and how much of a stat you might have overall. There are 5 attributes as well: strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, and wisdom. These all have effects on the levels of skills and spells that you can obtain, as well as providing passive bonuses like carrying weight, HP, and crit chance. In Alaloth, you don't gain experience like you might in other ARPGs. Instead, you gain levels by defeating fighting areas. This is quite a different thing, but I think it works rather well here. Perhaps the developers thought it a smooth way for the player to progress, which is tied in with the content that they want you to engage in. And what of the quests, dear old dwarf? There are lots of quests in the game, and I mean a lot. So many in fact that again it can get quite overwhelming. The NPCs that usually begin the quests will often have a lot to tell you about the background and all that, which means you're in for a lot of reading. For me personally, I got to the point where I had so many quests that they all sort of lost their individuality and meaning. I kind of glazed over somewhat and would rather spam through the text and read what was actually required in the quest log. This is just how I was, and I think it is great that the developers took the time to add in all the background here, making the world seem lived in with lots of history and things going on. If I were to give any feedback about the quests, I would suggest reducing them and focusing on the more meaningful ones. There is a lot of what you might call MMO style questing, like obtaining X amount of troll hearts or feathers from harpies, which isn't all that exciting. Having lots of quests is cool and can extend the length of the game, and I applaud the effort going into this, but you don't want it to feel like it's an endless slog. The other thing about the quests being a bit MMO-like is that you don't really get choices in what you can do and who you can side with. The quests tend to just have one conclusion. So, sadly, if you're looking for some deep role-playing with moral decisions and such, then you might be disappointed here. One word of warning with skipping through text. I did this on one particular quest and ended up being drugged and all my gold being taken. So you best be careful that there is the odd quest like this where you have to be on the ball. There is a lot going on with this game. There is an expansive world to explore, loads of lore to consume, enemies to dispatch, and quests to complete. If you're looking for something to get stuck into for 40 plus hours, then this is something for you. The 2D backgrounds going on here are wonderful to behold, with locations looking stunning. There simply seems to be just so much effort and love gone into this game, this is clear to me. I really enjoyed roving about the place like a bold adventurer, doing away with evils and seeking artifacts to further my goals. The combat is rewarding and doesn't get old quickly, becoming a chore. The companions perform well and are certainly a boon rather than a liability. The character build options are diverse and involving, which I think is another feather in the hat. I do wish perhaps that there wasn't quite the avalanche of quests and the UI was a bit more responsive at times. The fixed perspective and how small the characters are can also cause a little bit of trouble, but nothing too severe. Overall, I think this is a great game that allows for a good time to be had by the player and enjoyment aplenty. You can get lost in the world here, which can be good for people such as I that would like to avoid the silly worries of life for a while. If you like ARPGs with a difference, then I think you'll definitely like this game. The combat might put off some people, as it is a bit more active with dodges and parries and such, but I think you can get a lot out of playing this. I think Alaloth stands up as an important game that should hopefully become well known and experienced by lots of players. You can play a mighty dwarf taking down evil. What else do you want? It is available on both GOG and Steam right now, and is well worth the full price, if you ask me. And there we go, dear viewers, another video from me here down in the ancient hold. Thank you for watching all of the way through. It really does mean a lot to this old dwarf that someone would watch my rambling until the end.